Tonight, Amora, a young black waitress working the late shift, faces the storm, not just outside, but in her life. Bills are overdue, her manager is watching her every move, and one wrong step could cost her job. Then, through the rain, she sees him, an old man, soaked, shivering, standing alone on the sidewalk. Most people would pass by, but not Amora. She doesn't know it yet, but this single act of kindness will change everything, her job, her life, and reveal a truth no one saw coming. What happens when one act of kindness meets an unexpected truth? Before we proceed, kindly click the subscribe button, like and share for more stories. Rain slammed the city like it had something to prove. It wasn't the soft kind that cooled the air or washed dust from the streets. This rain came down heavy and cold, bouncing off cracked sidewalks and rattling against the diner's fogged windows like impatient fingers. Inside, the neon, open, sign flickered, half-broken, casting a tired red glow over chipped tables and worn vinyl seats. The dinner rush had already passed. All that remained were crumbs, empty coffee mugs, and the quiet dread that always settled in when tips were counted and came up short. Amora wiped down the counter with slow, practiced motions, her shoulders aching in a way that had nothing to do with work. 26 years old, black, and already exhausted in the bones. Her apron pocket felt too light. Again. She didn't need to count to know tonight wouldn't cover much, certainly not the overdue electricity bill waiting at home, certainly not her younger brother's transport fare for the week. Behind her, the manager's voice cut through the hum of the old refrigerator. Sharp. Impatient. Always watching. Hurry it up. We're not running a charity. Amora nodded without turning around. She had learned when to speak and when silence was safer. One more complaint, one more mistake, and she'd be out. He'd reminded her of that just yesterday, tapping the warning slip on the counter like a judge's gavel. Final notice. That was when she saw him. Through the streaked glass door, past the rain-smeared streetlights, stood an old man just beyond the awning. He wasn't trying to come in. He wasn't knocking or peering through the window like the others sometimes did. He simply stood there, rain soaking through his thin coat, hat in his hands, head slightly bowed as if listening to something only he could hear. Most people hurried past him. Shoes splashed. Umbrellas tilted away. A woman glanced at him and then quickly looked elsewhere, pulling her bag closer to her side. The city had perfected the art of not seeing. Amora's hand stilled on the counter. There was something about him that unsettled her. Not pity, she'd seen too much hardship to mistake it for that. It was the way he carried himself. Even soaked, even shivering slightly, he stood straight. His shoes were worn but clean. His coat, though old, had once been expensive. And his eyes, when he lifted them and met hers through the glass, were not desperate. They were calm. Measuring. The manager followed her gaze and scoffed. Don't even think about it. We're closing soon. I don't want customers uncomfortable. He's not bothering anyone, Amora said quietly, surprising herself. The manager stepped closer. I said no. You want to keep this job? Do what you're told. The old man seemed to understand. He gave a small nod, almost respectful, then turned away from the door and stepped fully back into the rain. Water soaked his shoulders instantly, darkening the fabric of his coat as he began to walk, slow and uneven, down the sidewalk. Something twisted in Amora's chest. She remembered another night, years ago, rain just as heavy, her mother coughing in a hospital corridor while Amora begged a nurse for help they couldn't afford. She remembered how one stranger had stopped, handed her mother a coat, and said nothing else. Just walked away. That small kindness had not saved her mother's life, but it had saved Amora's belief that the world wasn't entirely cruel. Amora glanced at the clock. Then at the door. Then at the warning slip folded in her pocket. Her feet moved before fear could stop them. She grabbed her umbrella, pushed through the door, and stepped into the rain. Sir, she called out. The old man paused and turned. Rain soaked her hair instantly as she held the umbrella over him instead of herself. Please, she said, breathless, at least take this. For the first time, the man smiled. And somewhere deep inside, Amara felt the quiet certainty that this single moment, this choice, had just tilted her life onto a path she could no longer see. The rain eased slightly beneath the umbrella, but the cold still clung to them both. Amara's hand trembled as she held the handle out to the old man, half expecting him to refuse, half praying he wouldn't. Her shoes were already soaked, socks squishing with every small shift of weight, but she barely noticed. All her attention was fixed on his face, lined deeply, yes, but not fragile. His eyes studied her with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of how exposed she was standing there, apron still on, name tag catching the streetlight. "You'll get sick," she said, trying to sound practical, as if this were a normal exchange and not something that could cost her everything. He glanced at the diner behind her, then back at her. "And you?" he asked softly. "Who worries about you?" The question landed heavier than the rain. Amara hesitated. "I'll manage," she said, the way she always did. "I usually do." He didn't take the umbrella immediately. Instead, he looked at her as though weighing something invisible. Then he reached out, not quickly, not clumsily, and accepted it with both hands, careful, almost reverent. "Thank you," he said. "But kindness should never bankrupt you." The words felt rehearsed, not scripted, but lived in. Like something he'd learned the hard way. "I can spare it," Amara replied, though she wasn't sure it was true. "Please. There's somewhere warm inside. You can sit for a bit. I'll bring you something hot." His gaze sharpened. "You could lose your job." Her jaw tightened. "I know." For a moment, the rain filled the silence between them. Then he nodded once. "Very well." Inside, the bell over the door chimed, too loud in the quiet diner. Amara felt the manager's eyes snap toward them instantly. The old man moved slowly but steadily to a corner booth, water dripping from his coat onto the floor. A couple of remaining customers glanced over, curiosity flickering across their faces. Amara rushed to grab a towel. As she bent to dab water from the old man's shoulders, her fingers brushed against something firm inside his coat pocket. Not sharp. Not soft. Structured. Leather. Her hand paused for half a second too long. The wallet was thick. Heavy. The edge smooth and well-kept, nothing like the cracked, flimsy ones she'd seen 100 times. For reasons she couldn't explain, her heart skipped. The manager cleared his throat loudly. 5 minutes, he said, not bothering to hide his irritation. That's it. Amara nodded again, forced calm masking the storm inside her chest. She brought the old man a bowl of soup and a mug of tea, paid for both before anyone could argue. He watched her do it, eyes flicking briefly to the register, then back to her face. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know," she replied. "This isn't about owing." He didn't touch the soup right away. Instead, he reached into his coat, fingers brushing the same pocket she'd felt moments earlier. Her breath caught. But he only pulled out a neatly folded handkerchief and wiped his hands. "When people help without asking for something back," he said quietly, "it changes the balance of the world. Even if just a little." She smiled, unsure why her eyes burned. When he stood to leave, steadier now, he slipped slightly on the wet floor. Amara lunged forward instinctively, catching his arm. For a brief moment, she felt his weight, solid, grounded, far stronger than she'd expected. He steadied himself and looked at her again, something unspoken passing between them. "Tomorrow," he said, adjusting the umbrella in his hand, "decides more than you think." Then he walked out into the night, leaving behind a damp floor, a furious manager, and a question Amara couldn't shake. What kind of man says something like that? Morning arrived without apology. Amara woke before her alarm, the words from the night before still echoing in her mind. "Tomorrow decides more than you think." She lay staring at the cracked ceiling of their small apartment, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the uneven breathing of her younger brother in the next room. For a moment, she wondered if the old man had been nothing more than another passing stranger, another moment of kindness swallowed by the city. But the weight in her chest told her otherwise. At the diner, the air felt tighter than usual. The manager didn't wait until she tied her apron. He slid a paper across the counter the moment she clocked in. "Final warning," he said flatly. "You broke policy. No loiterers. No exceptions." Amara read the words even though she already knew them. One more incident, and she'd be gone. No severance. No recommendation. Just another empty uniform folded into her bag. "I paid for everything," she said quietly. No one complained. "That's not the point," he snapped. "You don't get to decide who belongs here." She bit back a reply and nodded. Silence again. Survival again. The day crawled. Orders came and went, but her thoughts stayed fixed on the door, on the memory of rain and calm eyes and a voice that didn't beg. By mid-afternoon, her co-worker leaned in and whispered, "You know that guy probably played you, right? Happens all the time." "Maybe," Amara said, though the word felt wrong. Then, just before dusk, a black luxury car pulled up across the street. It didn't park in front of the diner. It didn't turn off immediately. It just waited. Engine idling softly, windows tinted too dark to see inside. Amara noticed it while refilling napkin holders. She told herself it meant nothing. Wealth passed through this street all the time without stopping. But when she glanced back a few minutes later, it was still there. Her pulse quickened for reasons she couldn't name. Later, as she stepped outside to dump trash, she caught a glimpse through the rear window of the car. On the seat lay a folded umbrella. Blue. Frayed at the edge. Hers. The trash bag slipped from her hand. Before she could react, the diner owner's car pulled in behind it. The manager stiffened visibly, smoothing his shirt, his voice suddenly respectful. "Didn't know you were coming today," he said as he hurried outside. Amara stood frozen near the door, heart pounding. The black car's door opened. And the old man stepped out, dry, composed, walking without a limp. He met Amara's eyes across the street and gave the smallest nod, as if reminding her of a promise she hadn't known she'd made. The owner hurried toward him, hand extended. "Sir," he said, voice tight with nerves, "I didn't know you were coming." Amara's breath caught. The air inside the diner shifted the moment the owner stepped through the door behind the old man. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to quiet, as if the building itself were holding its breath. The manager, who moments earlier had been barking orders, now hovered near the counter with a brittle smile, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Amara stood near the coffee station, unnoticed and painfully aware of her own heartbeat. The old man removed his hat and coat with deliberate care, handing both to the owner, who took them as though receiving something fragile and priceless. Under the harsh diner lights, the man looked different from the night before. Straighter. Sharper. His suit, simple, dark, fit too well to be accidental. His shoes, now polished, reflected the floor's dull shine. He took in the room slowly, eyes lingering on scuffed baseboards, the flickering neon sign, the slightly crooked health inspection notice taped near the register. His gaze paused on Amara for half a second longer than the rest. Not ownership. Recognition. The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, if this is about last night, I can explain." "Please," the old man said gently, raising a hand. "Let's not rush into explanations." The owner gestured to a booth. "Of course. Whatever you need." "They Saturday." The owner leaned forward, eager, while the manager remained standing, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Amara served coffee on instinct, her hands steady despite the storm building inside her. As she set the cup down, she overheard fragments of conversation. Words like inspection, complaints, records. The manager's voice dropped, urgent and hushed. "You said it was handled." "I followed your instructions." "I said to follow the law," the owner replied sharply. Amara's stomach tightened. Pieces began to click together, why certain supplies were always missing, why overtime never showed up on pay stubs, why the manager panicked whenever someone mentioned inspectors. The old man listened without interruption. When the manager finally stopped talking, breathless, he simply asked, "And the staff?" The manager blinked. The staff. How are they treated? Silence stretched. Amara felt it like a weight pressing down on her chest. The old man's eyes lifted, locking onto her. You, he said calmly. Come here, please. The manager turned, face draining of color. Sir, she's just a waitress. That, the old man said, voice still mild, is exactly why I'd like to hear from her. Amara walked forward, each step measured. She thought of her brother, of the bills, of the warning slip. She thought of rain and an umbrella she no longer had. Yes, sir. Why did you help me last night? He asked. The question was simple. The answer was not. She hesitated, then spoke the truth. Because leaving you out there felt wrong. The old man nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a reminder of the night that had set all of this in motion. For a moment, the diner seemed to recede, the walls thinning until Amara could barely hear anything except the steady rhythm of her own breath. The old man's question had opened a door she usually kept sealed tight. Why did you help me? It wasn't something she often examined. Kindness, to her, wasn't a decision, it was reflex, forged in loss and necessity. Still, as he watched her with patient attention, she realized this was not a question meant to trap her. It was an invitation to understand herself. She glanced down at her hands, roughened by detergent and long shifts, and memory crept in unannounced. Years earlier, she had worn a different uniform, scrubs, slightly too big, borrowed from a classmate. She had been at the top of her nursing cohort then, praised by instructors, trusted with responsibilities most students never touched. Her mother used to brag about her to neighbors, her voice filled with pride even as illness slowly hollowed her out. Amara could still see her sitting at the small kitchen table, smiling through pain, telling her, just keep going, baby. You're almost there. Then came the night the fever spiked. The rushed trip to the hospital. The waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. Bills piling up faster than answers. Amara remembered clutching her mother's hand while doctors spoke in careful tones, already preparing her for goodbye. After the funeral, there was no time to grieve. Her younger brother had stood in the doorway of their apartment, eyes wide, asking questions she didn't know how to answer. School became impossible. Dreams felt selfish. She traded textbooks for trays, lectures for late-night shifts, telling herself it was temporary. It always started that way. Back in the diner, the old man watched her face soften with memories she hadn't spoken aloud. He saw the weight there, not bitterness, but endurance. He had seen that look before. Because someone once helped my mother in the rain, Amara finally said, her voice steady though her chest ached. And I never forgot how that felt. The owner shifted uncomfortably. The manager swallowed hard. The old man closed his eyes briefly, as if the words had confirmed something deep and private. When he opened them again, there was a quiet gravity there, the kind that came from long years of choosing when to speak and when to listen. He stood slowly, straightening his jacket. Thank you, he said to Amara, not politely, but sincerely. Then he turned to the owner. We need to talk. The manager's shoulders stiffened. Amara noticed a thin sheen of sweat at his temples, the way his gaze darted toward the office door, toward escape. The old man noticed too. As they moved toward the back, Amara felt a strange pull of certainty settle in her chest. Whatever was about to happen had roots deeper than last night's rain. This wasn't coincidence. It was convergence. And for the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar stir beneath her fear. Hope. The office door closed behind them with a soft click, but it might as well have been a gavel striking wood. Amara remained by the counter, pretending to wipe a surface that was already clean, her senses sharpened. Voices filtered through the thin walls, muted, urgent. The owner spoke first, his tone cautious, deferential in a way she had never heard before. The manager's voice followed, higher, defensive, each sentence tumbling over the next as if speed alone might protect him. The old man said very little. That, Amara would later realize, was the most telling part. As the minutes passed, fragments slipped through the cracks. Payroll discrepancies. Unreported overtime. Health inspections delayed. Each phrase landed like a quiet explosion in her mind, illuminating small injustices she had long learned to ignore because survival demanded it. The missing wages. The broken freezer never fixed. The constant fear. Her coworker leaned close and whispered, "Do you know who that is?" Amara shook her head slowly. Before the coworker could answer, the office door opened. The manager came out first. He looked smaller somehow. His shoulders slumped, the color drained from his face. He didn't look at anyone as he walked to the counter, unlocked a drawer, and began pulling out papers with trembling hands. His authority had evaporated, leaving behind only panic. Then the old man stepped out. Up close, there was no mistaking it now. This was not a man surviving day to day. This was a man who had spent decades making decisions that rippled outward, shaping lives he would never meet. His name surfaced in Amara's memory suddenly, something she'd overheard once on the news in a diner like this, long ago. Elias Caldwell. Founder of Caldwell Hospitality Group. A quiet giant in the industry. Known for buying struggling diners, keeping them open when others would shut them down, insisting on community standards instead of profit margins alone. He looked at the staff, all of them now watching openly. "I walk my properties," he said calmly. "Not announced. Not escorted. I like to see them as they are." The manager's breath hitched. "Last night," Caldwell continued, "I walked in the rain. I wanted to know who noticed." His gaze settled on Amara. "I wasn't testing anyone," he said, anticipating the thought. "I was remembering." The owner cleared his throat. "Elias, Caldwell raised a hand. "You trusted the wrong person." He turned back to the manager. "You exploited kindness and punished it when it threatened exposure." The manager tried to speak. No sound came out. "You're done here," Caldwell said simply. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The manager's keys clattered onto the counter. He walked out without another word. Silence followed, thick, stunned. Caldwell exhaled slowly, as if releasing a burden he had carried longer than anyone realized. Then he turned back to Amara, his expression softer now. "Years ago," he said, voice low, "I collapsed outside one of my own restaurants. No one knew who I was. Most people walked past." Amara felt a chill crawl up her spine. "One young waitress didn't," he continued. "She lost her job that night for helping me." The room seemed to tilt. "I've been walking ever since," Caldwell said. Looking for her face in others. His eyes met Amara's again. "And last night," he said, "I found it." The silence that followed felt sacred, as if the diner had been turned into something more than a place for food and fleeting conversations. Even the neon sign outside seemed to flicker more gently, its tired glow no longer harsh but warm, almost protective. Rain began again, lighter this time, tapping the windows instead of assaulting them, as though the storm itself had learned restraint. Caldwell straightened his cuffs and looked around the room one last time. "This diner stays open," he said. "And it will operate the way it was meant to, from the ground up." Relief washed across faces. A quiet murmur followed, disbelief mixing with gratitude. For Amara, the weight she had carried for years loosened just enough for her to breathe. Caldwell turned to her. "You kept your job," he said, then paused. "But more than that. I need you here." Her stomach tightened. "Sir?" "I don't promote people as rewards," he said. "I promote standards." He gestured to the counter, the staff, the customers who had begun to drift back into their conversations, still listening closely. "This place needs leadership that understands what dignity looks like at eye level." The owner nodded, understanding dawning fully now. "Shift supervisor," he said quickly. "Effective immediately." Amara blinked. The words didn't feel real yet. She thought of her brother, of overdue bills, of the warning slip still folded in her pocket. She thought of scrubs tucked away in a drawer at home, untouched for years. Caldwell studied her face, as if seeing all of it too. And if you ever decide to return to school, he added, we have programs. Quiet ones. For people who never should have had to stop. Her breath caught. Later, after the crowd thinned and the adrenaline faded, Caldwell lingered by the door. Amora walked him out, the blue umbrella now folded neatly behind the counter where everyone could see it. You never told me your name, she said. Elias, he replied. And yours? Amora. He smiled. It suits you. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. Caldwell stepped into his car, then paused. The world doesn't change because powerful men notice, he said. It changes because people like you act before they know who they are helping. As the car pulled away, Amora stood watching until the taillights disappeared. She turned back into the diner, where laughter had returned, where the floor still bore faint watermarks from a man who had once stood there unnoticed. She reached into her apron and pulled out the warning slip. After a moment, she tore it in half and dropped it into the trash. Behind the counter, the umbrella waited, no longer a symbol of sacrifice, but of what happens when kindness meets its way back home.